going to see if, is this working, this mic? Okay, good. Because there's two other mics here. Okay. Thank you very much, Edmund, for a lovely introduction. And thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to see all of you here. Many of you have traveled a long ways to be here and have taken time out of busy lives to be here, and I really appreciate it. I don't think today would have been possible without the support and of all my friends and family represented here. And so I guess I'll just launch into the lecture now. The lecture is on a mathematical musical conversation, and I will start by playing some pieces that are bitonal in nature. Bitonal means that there's two tonalities going on at the same time. We know about tonality because of the amount of music that we've been exposed to throughout our lives. And these pieces play around with that knowledge of tonality by having two concurrently going on at the same time. These are pieces by composer Peter Child, and it's the pieces are called doubles because they're mostly bitonal in nature. And the three pieces are Cockatoo, River Song, and some kind of variations. And they're based on songs from my childhood. Oh, the microphone is not working. Let's try this. Is this now working? Okay, all right. Okay, so that was tonality, and I'll start with an analysis. Well, the three parts of today's lectures have to do with the three parts of music scholarship as we know it, or as it's commonly divided into analysis, performance, and composition. So we'll start with analysis. And my entry into music technology began with analysis and computational modeling of structures in music. And this started with the spiral array, which is based on the harmonic network, which dates back to Euler, very, very old mathematics, hundreds of years old. And this is a grid that represents tones in a series in such a way that things that are on a horizontal, share the same horizontal axis, are related by fifths. And things that are vertically aligned are major thirds apart. Okay, but they all sound good together. And things that sound like a triad, or are triads, form nice little triangles like this, and we all know this. And the next triad over there, and the next triad, just so I don't have to go back and forth. Here's this. Okay, the three triads that you need to harmonize any tune in any key. And so here are all the pitches in a given key. This happens to be a major key of C. You also get minor keys, so they're all nicely clustered in this space. And this fact was used by Longet-Higgins and Steedman in a very early key finding method. So they look for templates of keys to recognize what the key of a piece is. So there are a few ideas related to the spiral array. One is this grid, the tonets. The second one is actually having to do with the other field I belong to, which is operations research. And in operations research, in mathematical programming, normally you try to solve for an optimization problem that has linear constraints, and you're trying to maximize or minimize some function, and you have a feasible region that it has to exist within. And normally, the optimal point is at a corner, let's say over there. And the way to look for that optimal point is to start somewhere and to travel towards it by going along the edges. And this is the simplex method, which George Danzig is credited with having invented in the 1940s. And later on, in the 1980s, another method called an interior point method was invented that instead of going along the external points and the edges, started to go through the interior of the space, so much more quickly converge on the optimal solution. So it would do something like this. And this was a method that was invented by a mathematician called Narendra Karmakar in 1984. But interior methods at that point were not entirely new. This was an interior method that I worked on as an undergraduate with George Danzig. And this was a method that John von Neumann came up with in the 1950s. So you start with a point. Again, you start with an initial point. And you look for another point to help you get closer to the center. So you get closer to the center. And you start looking for another point to help you get closer to the center. And you get closer, closer. And again, you do that iteratively. And this way, you move through the interior of the space and you get closer to the center, which is the point, which will help you find the optimal weighting of the points in the exterior that will help you get to that origin. So if we combine these ideas, the original tonets, which if you look at it carefully and you stare at it for a very long time, you'll notice that there's a D here and there's a D over there, and that if you take it and you wrap it around and you staple the two Ds together, you'll end up with a helix that looks like this. And once you have a helix, you're in three-dimensional space, and we can start looking at the interior of the space. And the interior of the space is lovely because we still have those triangles, But now we can represent the triangles as single dots and connect those dots to form another helix inside of that outer helix to represent now those triangles, which are the major triads. And 3 of the major triads, remember, 3 together form the keys. And so we can again represent these triangles as single points on the triangles and connect them to form another helix inside the outermost ones. And so we have the major key in a helix. We can do the same to get the minor key in. Together they will form this double helix in the interior of that space. So this is the spiral array model. And when we have a geometric model that allows us to model things we know about tonality and the relationships of the tones one to another, as well as the hierarchical structures within that system, we can now use that to automatically detect what the key is. So this is where the CEG algorithm comes in. So if we have something that looks like this, ooh, this is tricky. See if I can reach the piano. Yes, I can. Okay, this is a mechanical animation. So, okay, so, voila, okay. Okay, we get to that point and we start looking for the closest key. So we look in the interior space within that double helix that I told you about earlier for the closest key, and we'll find, well, there we go, that's the closest key, and that would be F. I know that because this is in the key of F. But you also could know that by simply measuring the distance to the different representations of keys. And so this is the graph of the distances to F major, F minor, C major, and C minor. And as you can see, initially, F becomes the closest key. And then C vies for first place with F. And then F becomes first place again. Okay, so F wins. So that is the key finding algorithm. And the key finding algorithm with a number of other algorithms have been written up in a book that was recently published in 2014 in Springer in the Operations Research series on mathematical and computational modeling of tonality. It's also been implemented in a free app that anyone can download through the App Store by Alexandre Francois in an app called Musart. And now I will show you how Musart works. Oh, by the way, this lovely piano has been brought here by Yamaha. And they've brought a nice MIDI producing piano. It's a silent piano, so when I actually turn on, it's, whoa, I'm so sorry. When I turn on the silent piano, which will now be more silent. Okay, let's see, does it work? Yes, okay, it's now electronic. We will get it to do the analysis live as I'm playing. Okay, so okay, so here's the chord of C in the key of C. D minor in key of C, G major in the key of C, C major in the key of C. And we have, that's all nice and good, but now we have PDQ Bach. If you've heard of JS Bach, you must have heard of PDQ Bach. who's the long-forgotten son of J.S. Bach. Not really. He never had a son named P.D.Q. Bach, but P.D.Q. Bach is Peter Schickerle, who's a professor at Juilliard, and who has written a series of pieces after after J.S. Bach's Prelude and Fugue, and they're called the well-tempered clavier. That was J.S. Bach. So these are called the short-tempered clavier. And here is the one that's based on, yeah? Whoa, that's out of the key. Okay, so thank you. So that's a demonstration of Musart analyzing things live. I think at this point, because of time, I will quit from Musart, and you're welcome to come play with Musart after the talk. Okay, so that was P.D.Q. Bach, but at this point I should also mention what we can do more than simply recognize key and do real-time analysis of music. We can also use the model to generate music and to help constrain it to what is normal and what is surprising. And this is a work that is done with Doreen Hermans, who's a Marie Curie fellow in my lab, and she's worked on machine-generated music. So using the model, we've devised ways of measuring tonal tension. So things that are very dissonant have a very big diameter. So this is called the cloud diameter. And things that are very, that move too fast have a high momentum. And so this is the cloud momentum inside the space. And tensile strain is when there's sort of a center that you're operating in, but you're sort of pulling far away from it, which you saw just now when I did something that was out of key, when I played something that was in a different style that used other notes that were not in the normal key. And so with this, we can measure things such as musical tension, and this is the Tristan chord. Oh, off with the silent piano. Now, regular piano back. Ah, good. So that's high tension. High tension again, and then relax back. Yeah? So that's how the tension model works. The music generation module also looks at repeated patterns such as these, and then finds all the repeated patterns using work by David Meredith. And this is an example of what constraining the tension actually does for the piece. So if you start with randomly generated notes using the P.D.Q. Bach piece, using the rhythms of the P.D.Q. Bach piece, you will get something that, you could get something that sounds like this. Whoops, I am sorry. We will make that less jarring. Okay, not very good. We will move on, and after one iteration of constraining the piece, the generated notes to conform to the tension profile of the original piece, you will get something that looks like this. Okay? And And if we do this a few more times, you've already got most of your improvement through the first step, just like kind of the interior point method. Okay, so you start getting pieces that sound like the original one. Not quite, but sort of much closer than you would if you just randomly generated pieces. And I'm going to play you one of the generated pieces from Morpheus PDQ Bach. And Morpheus PDQ Bach just generated this piece last week, so this is fresh off the press. And, where is Morpheus PDQ Bach? Here we go. I picked one that was not too tonal, that had not been too much optimized, because if you optimize it fully, you end up with the original piece itself, and you haven't, you haven't generated a new piece. So here we have the Prelude in C from the short-tempered clavier by Morpheus PDQ Bach. Okay, so that was Morpheus's piece. So as you can see, tonality is an important constraining factor, but not everything. So now I'm going to play you a piece, which many of you have probably heard. I'm going to get out of this. So everything's peachy and good in the beginning. Yes, still all peachy and good. All good. A cloud rolls in now. And all is peachy and good again. And the sun comes out here, yeah? Okay. So we have seen how tonality can be used to manipulate our emotion response to music. And if we actually look at measuring the distances of how far it's moved in that space, in this, you look at two adjacent windows, two chunks of music, and how far it's moving in that space, you can actually track where there are big changes happening. And the biggest one is that big half step at the end when the sun comes out, and you see the big distance over there. And no matter what window you use, you'll get to see that nice big peak anyways. So this is also used in, segmentation is an important task in music information retrieval, but it's also an important thing for musicians to use in the performance of music. And here's an example of the Moonlight Sonata. Most of you have heard this. And the Moonlight Sonata starts with C sharp minor. All C sharp minor, continuing. And now we go to the first new key, E major. And E minor now. Moving towards C major. and B minor. So this is how tonality works. And if we actually use something really handy, like our sonic visualizer, developed here at the Center for Digital Music, it's one of the tools that's very widely used by musicologists worldwide. We can annotate the onsets of all those beats and look how people are manipulating time in order to reveal those structures. And this is an example from Arthur Schnabel, and this is how he shapes the phrases to guide you to hear the structures I just outlined for you. And the final B minor. So you can see that the shaping of the phrases, the modulating of the tempo, it's not random. It's actually guided by the structure underlying, the tonal structure underlying in that piece. So here we move on to expressivity. This is where we can use mathematical and computational tools to look at musical expressivity. So we've just looked at segmentation based on those shapings of the phrases. Here's examples of segmentations this is by Glenn Gould. This is the grouping. Okay, so he's grouping them by the bar. This is the younger Glenn Gould in 1955. As he got older, he got more complex. And this is the 1981 Glenn Gould. So in our lab, we've been building tools to be able to measure different aspects of expressivity, and I'd like to, at this point, highlight work by two students in the lab. I work very intensely with the students that I've had the honor to work with, and it got to the point where I think my daughter, when she was 3 or 4, used to say, "When I grow up, I'm going to have students." And so this is two students who are graduating this year, Katerina and Lu Wei. And Katerina worked on loudness. And if you looked at shapings of loudness, they kind of look like this. If you took any recording and you mapped out the loudness, you would get a waveform that looks like this. And if you look at about 60 different performances, you'd see something that looks like this, and you can see patterns over long ranges of time. And if you looked at a pianissimo marking in the score and a fortissimo marking, you could say things like, gee, that pianissimo, which is supposed to be very, very soft, is really way louder than the fortissimo, which is supposed to be very, very loud. So why is this the case? And then you can go back and look at the score and you go, wait a minute, that pianissimo happens over here. It goes to major. So it went from minor. It's a bit like that sun coming out moment in Think of Me. So most people would not want to go down really soft at that moment. They would want to just sing and just sing out loud. And so that may be why the pianissimo is not very soft. And the fortissimo at the very end comes after this. Okay, so that's the very end after a quiet, I didn't quite play it that quiet, but the moment before that is actually very quiet, and then you wouldn't really just jarringly come in really strong at that moment just to end the piece. So it's unusual for that fortissimo to be there, and most people kind of ignore it. So this is an example of what we can do with the technology. Katharina also looked at change point analyses of loudness. This is joint work also with Rebecca Killick and Oscar Bantlow in the Mathematical Sciences department. And change points looks at when the statistical properties of the signal actually change. And looking at that, you can actually detect where the points of change and therefore what people are doing, and you can compare performances across different pianists. In Louet's work, he looked at vibrato and portamento, and vibrato sounds, and portamento, so vibratos are the little wiggly lines, and the portamentos are the slides going from one note to another. And this is in work together with a colleague, Khalid Rajab. We've looked at using other techniques other than the fast Fourier transform, in this case the filter diagonalization method, the FDM method, which is able to extract signal parameters at much finer granularities with very tiny slices, in tiny slices of time, much tinier than what the fast Fourier transform would require. So as you can see, the lower one is done with the fast Fourier transform, and the middle graph is done with the filter diagonalization method. And the fast Fourier transform, it looks like a picture with pixels that are too large because the windows are too large to get detail. And the one with the FDM is finer grain, and you can actually see details in that. And this is useful because vibratos happen at such tiny time scales that we need to have that small window in order to get the parameters. And so we now have an application, again, freely downloadable from the web, that allows you to upload a sound file and to extract these parameters, and it would automatically find all the vibratos and all the portamentos. So here's an example of an application. This is a performance of the Grand Tango. This was a performance with Ian Presland, and in this particular part, you should be paying attention to the purple markings. So Ian plays this Les mezzo forte, and he starts his slide at the end of the second line from the very first beat. So he starts sliding down from the very first beat. And so let me just play it. And this is Susie playing that very same passage. The accompanist is the same, it was me. And you should now pay attention to the pencil markings, which is forte. She starts this forte much louder than Ian, and she uses an open string on that D. And I guess she doesn't start from the very first beat, since she noted that Ian started from the very first beat. So her slide was more of a swoon at the end of the note, and Ian's was more of a okay, so we can see this in the signal. So that's Ian's. That's Susie's. Okay, and we can quantify things about these. I didn't put up all the numbers, but you can get numbers that quantifies how these two are different parametrically. Okay. At this point, we move on to tipping points. This is an article that came out last year in Music Perception. Tipping points, as you can imagine, we all know about tipping points. We've experimented with it because it's how things work in the real world. If something is about to tip over, yeah, okay, that's a tipping point. It's going to fall, yeah. So we all know about tipping points because we've experimented with it. Tipping points also exist in music. So it's a timeless moment when you go, and then it goes on, yeah? Just like in tipping points in physics and in dance. And in these tipping points, they're quite visual. You can see them happening. These are big tipping points in performances by sopranos who are very good at tipping points. And this is Maria Callas singing O mio bambino caro. So not only are sopranos very good at this, concerto soloists are very good at this. This happens a lot at the, here we go. In the cadenza, at the very end of cadenza, because that's where we know, the beginning parts, the main theme is going to come back again, and we've had this long, big stretch of dominant area, so we know the tonic, which is going back to the home tonality, is going to come back. So this is where the pianist can actually take as much time as she wants, and you will wait for it, because you're anticipating it and you want it to happen. And this is Martha Argerich playing Strauss Burlesque. This is cadenza. And it feels so good when it comes because she's made you wait for it. Okay, so this is how that works. And you can see, here's the tipping point. She's not the only one to do it. Other people do it too. And this is how composers, as well as performers, manipulate our expectations and emotion response to music. With the tipping points, I'll do just one last example, and this is Chrysler. And he starts with a tipping point at the very beginning. And this is very unusual, but he's Chrysler playing his own piece, so he gets away with it. All right, so you can see that there's great variation in the way the beats come and go. This is what it looks like against the score, and this is what it looks like when you actually put it in real time with the audio, and it looks very much like this. Yeah? Roller coaster. Okay, so this is, you get taken along on this ride, and you just go along with it. So that's the expressivity segment. Now we move on to composing. So what can we do with composing? We've looked at, most recently, at timing and how that gets shaped. So we'll continue with timing and rhythm. And this is a piece, a very classic piece. This is Haydn. And this is Cheryl Frances Hope, who's taken every single rhythm in Haydn and stolen it. I didn't point out that she stole it. The piece is called Stolen Rhythm. And this stolen rhythm piece goes like this. The rhythm is exactly like the Haydn, the notes are different. So we did exactly the same with Morpheus. Of course, Morpheus had to get in the game again. And Morpheus takes this and does. Okay, so Morpheus does the same, different notes, still with the tension model and with the patterns. And related to this of stealing rhythms, we have practicing Haydn. This is a project I did with Peter Child and Lena Wiester-Grönli. And it takes my sight reading of this piece, the first time I played the piece by Haydn, the original Haydn, and transcribes it note by note, rhythm by rhythm, all the durations that I played, just as I played it with all the mistakes and with all the repetitions, as is. So I'll show here both the original score and the transcribed new score made from my sight reading. And what you are hearing is my sight reading of the piece. Okay, so, and then that score gets printed out and given to someone else to play as a performable score. And I'm going to play that now. That's the transcribed score. Okay, so that's practicing Haydn. That's the. And now I'm going to end with an ongoing project that I'm working on right now, along the same themes of stolen rhythms and transcribing other people's pieces and rearranging them. We now have stolen heartbeats. My original inaugural was scheduled for last October. It didn't happen because I was ill with arrhythmia. And so these are pieces based on recordings of my heartbeats. And here's a little strip. This is what it sounded like. This is what my heart sounded like. So da 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 pa pa pa. Yeah. So we put that to music. So we have. Oh, by the way, all's good now. It doesn't happen anymore. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So no, there's two more to come. Yeah. So here's a slower one. This is mellow. This is here we go. Yeah. Okay. So oh wait. Do you want? Maybe you can see this along with the signal. You can see the line going along with it. And I thought this sounded a lot like this Bach piece, which is originally for flute and accompanying keyboard. And so now it's ta 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 ta. So there we go. That was in the melody, and this is a faster one. This one is quite good. This is like a tango. Okay, you get the idea. And so I put it to a tango. Sorry, let me do that again. Okay, it was a bit fast, but the heartbeat was fast, so I tried to keep up with it. So that was the tango. So this is still an ongoing project. I'm still waiting for the full signal so that I can make longer pieces. And so that concludes the composition part of the lecture. And now I will end with a piece from the same set that I began with, doubles. And this is the epilogue. It was written in memoriam to William Albright, and it's a ragtime. And it has all those things you've heard about before: timing stretches, loudness, breaks, and funky rhythms.